Heyo, Bells Buddies. Today in reading, we are going to continue working on identifying the main idea in a non-fiction text. I want you to be able to confidently say, I can identify the main idea in a non-fiction text. So I'm going to share a little song with you that will help you to understand the main idea and how we find the main idea using our reading and our thinking voices. So as a reminder, the reading voice, it sees the pictures, it reads the words from the text. Whereas our thinking voice, it's going to be deciding, well, what do those words mean? What does this combination of pictures and captions and title and the text itself, what does it all mean? And that's where our thinking voice is going to come in. So the song that I have goes a little bit like this. It's to the tune of the Hokey Pokey. You find the main idea in the text you read. Think of what it means so you know what it's all about. You need to draw conclusions in the text you read each day to know what it's all about. So the main idea, Hokey Pokey, is what it's all about. So when we're finding the main idea, we don't just read the words. We have to think also about what the words mean. So your job on Friday was to read this story from ReadWorks, So Many Spices. So I'm going to walk you through how I found the main idea, how I used my thinking voice to help me understand what my reading voice was telling me. So many spices. Lots of foods have their own flavor, but some have weak flavor. They don't taste like much. So what do people do when they add more flavor to a food? They can add spices. A spice is something that's used to give flavor to foods. Some spices come from different, I misread. Spices, not some spices, all spices come from different parts of different plants. Some of these spices are seeds, like sesame, poppy, and cumin. One of my favorites. I think it was one of my favorites. Other spices come from tree bark. Like cinnamon is a spice that comes from the bark of a tree. And some spices come from fruits. Pepper is a spice that comes from a fruit. To make pepper, people dry out a berry called a peppercorn, and then they grind that up. Spices are popular all over the world, but many spices are only grown in warm, wet places. Lots of them are grown in South and East Asia. Long ago, this meant that people from Europe had to travel to trade to get the spices they wanted. Explorers sailed across the oceans to get to the areas that grew spices. Today, it's a lot easier to get spices from all over the world. That's something to be happy about the next time that you add pepper to your meal. So I read the text. Now I have to activate my thinking voice to help me to draw conclusions as to what this text wants me to know. What is the most important idea? What is it all about? Well, if you're saying it's all about spices, I agree, but what is it about spices? So we need to think about that. Now in this first paragraph, it told us that spices add flavor to food. That's detail. That's not the most important idea. Well, how do I know the most important idea? I have to think. I have to read the details and think about, what do all these mean? What is being repeated? What does the picture show? What does my title show? In the second paragraph I read, a spice is something that's used to give flavor to foods, okay? And spices come from different parts of plants. I'm gonna write that detail down. Spices come from plants. And where do these plants come from? Do you remember? If not, reread your text. Most of these plants, they grow in warm, wet places. I'm looking at paragraph 3. Lots of them are grown in South and East Asia. Because of that, long ago, people had to travel very far to get the spices they wanted. So yes, they come from plants, and most of our spices grow in Asia. And then the last paragraph says, today, it's a lot easier to get spices from all over the world. Yeah, because Asia's pretty far away. So I'm thinking, how did they come over here? We traded them. So since it's easier to get them now from all over the world, that's something to be happy about the next time that you're adding pepper to any meal. So my thinking voice, now I'm wondering, why is it easier? Probably because now we have airplanes and big boats that help to get the spices from one side of the world to the next. But I don't want to make inferences when I'm finding my main idea. I want to use the details from the text itself, from my reading. And I'm gonna then think about those details and use them to determine my main idea. So we know spices add flavor. We were told in the text that spices come from plants and that most of these spices grow in Asia. So if I were to take that and put it into one statement telling the main idea, well, I'm definitely gonna include spices as a part of my main idea because it is most certainly the topic of this story. And then I'm gonna use use the details about these spices to make a main idea. Now, if I start talking about specific spices like cumin and how it comes from, what did it say it comes from? It comes from seeds, and how cinnamon comes from bark. Well, those are little details. And they helped me, but that's not my big picture. That's not what it's all about. This is all about how a spice is something that adds flavor to what about all the details it gave me on where the spices come from? I don't want to omit those. I don't want to get rid of them. I'm going to add another sentence to my main idea. And this sentence is going to tell me come from plants that grow mostly in Asia. A spice is something that adds flavor to foods. They come from plants that grow mostly in Asia. And I could probably still make that into one sentence. Watch this. So I'm gonna take these two thoughts, my two sentences, a spice, and I'm going to put it together in a single main idea statement. It is okay to have two sentences as your main idea statement, but I think that I can make this even more specific to tell the reader what is it mostly about. It's mostly about spices come from plants in Asia and are used to add flavor to food. Spices come from plants in Asia and are used to add flavor to food. I don't think I read a sentence that said this, but what I did do, I used my thinking voice. I used the clues to draw conclusions. I used the clues to come up with a single statement telling the reader what the story was mostly about. Yes, it did mention how explorers had to go across the ocean to get spices, and it did mention that pepper comes from a fruit. However, those are just details that helped me to draw the conclusion that spices come from plants in Asia and are used to add flavor to food. So whenever you have to find the main idea, I hope the hokey pokey comes into your mind. But I hope you change the words to this. You find the main idea in the text you read. Think of what it means so you know what it's all about. You need to draw conclusions in the text you read each day to know what it's all about.